The reload continues as Dan Lanning and the Ducks make another splash in the transfer portal. And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, arguably with the most, Max Torres, and I am so stoked to have you guys back on the podcast or on the YouTube channel, however you're tuned in for another episode of your go-to Oregon football and recruiting podcast. That is the Ducks Dish podcast. It is Thursday, January 18th, but it's Wednesday as I'm recording this. And man, is it an exciting time for Oregon football in the transfer portal. Not rolling solo. I am joined by my guy, Rian Winter, a.k.a. Sports Chat 503, dealing with a bit of a freeze out in Portland. How the heck are you, Ryan?
I'm doing good, Max. I'm doing good. We're holding it down.
Nice. Well, hope you're doing your best to stay warm is kind of what you were telling me before we hit the record button over here. But man, we got to talk about the Ducks because they are in the headlines once again as Duke defensive back Brandon Johnson has committed to Oregon. Dan Lanning and the Ducks continue to leverage the transfer portal to reload and retool their roster, more specifically in the secondary. And Brandon Johnson is a name I had heard about quite a while ago when he initially entered the transfer portal, but I'll be honest, this commitment kind of caught me off guard. So that's why I'm glad to hop on here and just chat some Ducks with you. I know you already have a video on it, so you know the deal, but just to get people up to speed who maybe don't know who Brandon Johnson is, he's a junior. He'll have 1 year of eligibility, it looks like, once he gets to Eugene, listed at 5'10", 180 pounds on the Duke roster. And this is a guy who was an all-ACC honorable mention in 2022. And that 2022 season, he had 5.5 sacks, which I believe was tied for the team lead, which you don't hear from a defensive back all too often. He's originally from Newton, North Carolina. And I think this is a great addition for the Ducks because, as we saw last year, coverage was an issue in the passing game. So that's just the short of it. But we're going to get into all angles of this commitment. Ryan, what are your thoughts off the top here?
Well, you love a safety that's been around long enough to have 2 different jersey numbers. You know, I mean, what I like about this is the transfer portal is a unique place, right? It's a place where you can go and get certain things that you can't really get in recruiting right out of the gate. And one of those things is the knowledge of playing safety and holding down the back. This guy flies around, man. And you said it, man. The sacks is what I looked at. Well, as soon as I put the film on tape, this guy's coming off the thing and he's not running off the edge and going across offensive tackles, but he's going up against oftentimes the running back as they're trying to cover. And he's manhandling his running backs and getting all over these quarterbacks. So I love his tape. The tape jumps off the page. And again, I like what I see when you look at it. The big thing also, Duke has been a good team. You know, I think people always kind of, I don't know if they get into the basketball school versus they can't see Kentucky for a good football team. Sometimes they can't see Duke for a good football team. Sometimes they get locked in the thing. And Duke has steadily been one of the better teams in the ACC lately. And if you look at a guy like him, he's been a very productive member of their team from what I've seen. And of course, everybody, when you put the film on, everybody looks good because it's just your highlight reels. But, you know, Duke has been a team that I think has been steadily getting better and better. And it's been on the defensive side that they've been really impressive. Now, for Oregon needs help on the safety. You need this. And this is a classic example of like who a guy like Evan Williams be able to come in and give you something on day one. This guy's going to be able to come in and give you something on day one. From my perspective, as a guy who I like to play, the way I like to play football and the way I like to see football being played, this guy plays with aggression. This guy wants to make the tackle. He wants to make the hit. And I think that's the other thing. I love his body language on the field. I love his energy and what you can see that he brings to the table the Ducks need. So, again, Dan Lanning and company has done nothing but check every single box that you need to. And I think it's also something to be said that you're doing this at a time where you're also switching gears with the coaching staff a little bit in that side, right? So with Coach Martin out, Coach Hampton over to that side. So it's like, you're doing all of this, bringing in all these guys with coach movement. I mean, I think that they're managing this thing beautifully.
And I love that you mentioned the coaching movement, Ryan, because as I was doing some of my research, I was actually texting with our guy Spencer McLaughlin a little bit, and I was you always have to kind of backtrack with these portal commitments or with coaching hires. What's the connection? Where is there an Oregon connection with the head coach Dan Lanning or the chief of staff Marshall Malco or whatever it is? And what do you know? The connection here is Chris Hampton, the new defensive backs coach and co-defensive coordinator, newly minted defensive backs coach is Chris Hampton. He recruited Brandon Johnson to Duke. So this is just kind of cool, a full circle moment as we have that simultaneous, coaching movement going on right now with the Ducks a little bit. So I think that it's cool that it kind of comes full circle. And Chris Hampton, again, just proving his value just right on the heels of a promotion under Dan Lanning's staff.
Yeah. And I think that's also like that speaks volumes of what recruiting's all about, right? You maintain relationships, you continue to have relationships, and it might open up for you now, it might up for you later. And that's why you got to always be positive with these guys. You never know what the situation's going to be. And it's a unique part of sports that the average person just does not understand, which is to maintain and build relationships on the what if. It's just nothing is built on anything yet. Everything is on the what if. And then once that what if comes together and comes to fruition, look at examples like Christian Gonzalez. I mean, this is a guy that's, literally just skyrocketed up the draft charts by transferring, by staying with his position coach that he knew, by having better relationships, by getting to a better place. So the writing's on the wall. If you're a transfer, let's go, man. I think anybody who's talking negatively about the transfer portal these days are really behind, because I think most of the whole country understands now it's much more positive than it is negative.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely a complicated conversation as far as the portal goes, because I think I hear from a lot of people, maybe more than most, about how the transfer portal is negatively affecting the sport, whether as far as opportunities for high school guys, opportunities for junior college guys, whatever it is. But then you also see some of the positive aspects with look at Oregon, a guy like Jay Harris, a Division II All-American playing at a much smaller school at Northwest Missouri State. And then Carlos Lachlan makes his way out to St. Louis and identifies this 6'2", 215-pound back that's going to come to Oregon. So it's also creating some opportunities for some guys that maybe went, undervalued or under the radar, underlooked, however you want to phrase it. So it's definitely a complicated situation. I know a lot of people have their thoughts on the portal, but hey, if you guys are watching this on my YouTube channel, go ahead and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about the portal and what you think about Oregon football recruiting right now. Ryan, one thing that just to add some additional background here with Brandon Johnson, I was able to text one of my connections at Oregon today just to kind of get a little bit of background on him and kind of like what the word is, what the story is with this guy. So Brandon Johnson visited Oregon earlier this month, and this is a guy who is going to be playing some nickel, it looks like, for the Ducks, as we kind of mentioned earlier. But, he's going to be playing kind of that star nickel role for Oregon, and he's really, really good in covering the slot. So that's something that's important to know, because we talked about his physicality. We talk about how disruptive he is, whether you're looking at what he's able to do getting after the quarterback or just causing some chaos in the backfield, forcing fumbles, pass deflections. I really think he is a guy that can do it all in the defensive backfield. But the thing with him is that he's not the biggest defensive back that you'll find. And I think we've kind of seen that as a trend, certainly among the cornerbacks, that is, for this Oregon defense, lengthy guys that can run. But he's at 5'10", 180. So seeing that he is a bit on the smaller side, I think that they're bringing him in because he can cover, and that's what they really need.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you've seen a variety of things happening with Kobe Savage coming in and everything else. I think there's more has been expected from the defense every single year as the offense continues to get more and more complicated. As soon as you send a guy out on an island, it's very difficult. Look at these guys last year. You covered the whole thing beautifully, and you left this much of a window open for Rome Odunze on the back shoulder fade to be able to get it in there. It's a tough position. The only way you're going to be able to stop that is to climb all the way over the guy, which you can't do, or be in front of the guy the whole time, which is impossible as well. And again, as kind of a basketball analogy, it's like that perfect post entry pass. You know, when you have it kind of walled off and you've got that post entry pass. Playing the cornerback position is one of the toughest positions in all of sports. You got to run backwards as fast as some of the fastest guys are running forward. You got to you got to even know where the ball is at all. You got to turn your hips and you got to find the ball within a fraction of a second and then put your hand up in the exact placement that the ball is going to be, not where the ball is when you first see it. And you have to do all of this without touching the guy or having that much contact with the guy, or else you're going to get a flag. And those flags are brutal against your defense and are very costly and will literally get you taken out of the game. Next person in the game. So it's like, man, you want to talk about cutthroat. We've always talked about them being on an island. I don't think it's spoken enough how difficult it is to be in that position. Offensive linemen have to run backwards against, freak athletes as well. But you're talking about these guys going up against track stars on the other side. These guys get to run full speed right past them, and they have to somehow cover them. That's a really difficult ask. So what I like about a cornerback is a cornerback who can really play football. They don't have to be so skilled and they don't have to be so fast where they can just cover a guy. They can really willing to put their, I would say head down and tackle a guy, but you can't do that anymore. Really to put themselves in front of a guy and actually do something right, because a lot of these guys don't like to hit. And some of the best corners of all time. I mean, Deion Sanders, probably the best corner of all time. And notoriously did not like to tackle, right? Did not like to bring that lumber. And there's other guys that really do. And I think those are the guys that Dan Lanning and company want out of this defense, because they want to put pressure from the quarterback from a variety of different angles. And Dan Lanning has talked about this over and over, having those exotic blitzes where you put, Dan Lanning wants to put pressure with 4. It doesn't matter what 4 you have. You just have to do it with 4 somehow. And we've seen them come off the edge with the safety in the past. And I'm assuming you're going to see this, because as soon as you put the tape on, you see his sacks. That's like the first thing you see. So I'm excited as heck for it. And I'm excited that they're going to bring in more guys to solidify more holes that you have in the defense, because that's where the transfer portal really makes a difference.
And we'll talk some more about this overall haul for the Ducks in the portal a little bit later on in this episode, Ryan. But I really do like how he is able to get after the quarterback and those TFLs and the sacks that he has. When you look at what the Oregon defense did last year with a guy like Evan Williams, this guy seems like a perfect fit, because that was one of the things that made this group special, was the fact that they were able to come screaming off the edge in these interesting situations. No worries. But these guys like Evan Williams were coming screaming off the edge, and opposing offenses had no answer for it. So if you can bring these do-it-all defensive backs, it's just going to make your defense that much more dangerous. I think bringing in a guy like Brandon Johnson, I've seen some people say it, and I just want to echo it. I think it kind of frees up Tysheem Johnson to play a little bit more of his natural safety position. Right. And he is going to be a big piece that comes back in 2024. And then Kobe Savage comes over from Kansas State. So I think I said it overall, but I mean earlier on, but this feels like Dan Lanning and the Ducks, they're just putting together another stellar haul in the transfer portal, and everything kind of seems like it's falling the way that they want it to, because they're identifying a need and they're saying, hey, let's get that guy. Yep, we'll take him too. And yeah, how about him too? So it just seems like they're doing a masterful job. And I think that that just shows that this Oregon staff is so locked in. And I mean, you got to give a huge shout out to, Marshall Malco and the rest of that staff, because it's not all just Dan Lanning. It takes a big group to make this thing hum.
Oh, absolutely. I also think it's impressive to kind of see as transfers come in, when they get a second year in a place. I mean, look, you're going to see Nico Reed, you're going to see Tysheem Johnson, both those guys. Then you're going to see guys mixed in there who are maybe, some of those younger guys going to be able to get a chance to play. And I think that's the beauty of the modern age of college football, is you're going to get these new teams assembled that are not the team that you originally thought you were going to have. It was the team that you have this year, and every year you're going to have to do this. But to see the transfers be able to come in the first year, make a difference, but then stay one more year, maybe even 2 more years in the same system, I think you can see real growth there. And that's where I think the transfer portal really takes off for guys. I don't know if it's necessarily in the way a lot of people look at it, where they think it's like a 1-year rental, the way the old system kind of mentality was. Now I think a lot of guys are transferring in year 1, in year 2, and they have a lot of time to spend it in another place, or maybe even 2 places. So to me, I think that you want to see growth every single year. And I think the defense, you're going to see this defense continue to get better, and it should and continue to get better on that side of the defense, on the back end of the defense. Now, the big difference to me is it how you're going to change when you get over to the Big Ten, because they don't throw the ball as much. You got to have better run coverage, and you got to be able to play some physical football, because even those wide receivers over there historically are bigger wide receivers who love to block, right? And so this idea is that when they run that ball, how can you disengage? How can you come down and make a play and help your team out? Because this team is going to need a different type of defense to be successful in a different type of league.
And let's stay there for a second, Ryan, just talking about the approach in the transfer portal, the 1-year rental, so to speak, versus maybe some of the longer tenure guys, because we're seeing every team do it. But let's just take Oregon, for example. Evan Stewart is a guy that comes to Oregon with multiple years of eligibility remaining. And then guys like a Brandon Johnson or a Cam Alexander, those are guys that only have 1 year left on their college careers. So it's an example, I think, or an opportunity rather, to point out that you have to be careful in the way that you manage the transfer portal. You got to look for guys that can help you fill holes, help you fill needs on your roster that you maybe don't feel like you addressed in the high school ranks. But you can't get over reliant on it, because if you're bringing in a bunch of 1-year guys year after year after year, that's not a recipe for success, because you're not going to have any continuity. And we're seeing Oregon have another guy like Dante Moore, who is a perfect example for the big picture approach, the long haul approach. The idea is that he comes in for a year, doesn't have to play more than 4 games, and back up Dylan Gabriel, and then compete for that starting job in 2025. So it's another opportunity to just see that you got to be careful with the way that you manage it. And Oregon is not going to become a portal school, even though they have now added 10 players.
Yeah. Well, and even in the modern age, I mean, even when you say a portal school, I mean, I know in the land of recruiting, those are tough words. Maybe that's a negative connotation, but the modern age, you're going to need the portal. Here's how I always look at it. And again, I hate to always kind of try to go big picture, but as a coach myself for 20 years, I work on a spreadsheet, right? I work on graph paper, basically. And what you have is you have your positions and you have your depth, and you work off that page constantly. And I loved what they were saying about Dick Tomey and all the stuff with the Arizona, with the new coach Arizona, who's an old school Arizona guy. They said that in sports, you're either rebuilding the team, you're building a brand new team, or you're trying to keep a team together. And it's constant movement. And that's in the old system where you could keep guys for 4 or 5 years locked in. Now guys are moving all the time. So when you look at it through the spreadsheet idea, you bring in your recruiting class, and you know this better than anybody as a recruiting guy. You want to fill every one of those spots. You don't want to have any empty spot on there. We're talking about a variety of positions, position groups. As they age, though, you're going to have attrition where they're going to start to move off some places here and there in the transfer portal. You're going to have to replace those guys somehow with guys their same age or in and around their same position group, age, or ability. And you're not going to find those guys out of high school, especially if it's in year 2 or 3. And if you have a guy who's a junior who graduates early, because the way these guys graduate now, it's crazy, wants to go to a different place, why would you fault him? Let's go. Look at a guy like Dawson Yamarillo, right? Goes to a different place. That's great. Gets another opportunity. The opportunity is that then you're going to need to replace that with somebody else. And you can't go replace a 3rd-year offensive lineman with a guy coming out of high school. You need the guy coming out of high school to be there in 2 or 3 years, hopefully, if they get there. So I love the planning of it. As a teacher, I'm constantly planning. I'm constantly looking ahead. As a coach, you're constantly planning, and you're constantly doing your 2 deep. You're constantly doing your 3 deep, because you never know when those position groups are going to have to take a hit. Somebody's going to leave. Somebody's going to get injured. You're going to need to replace them for somebody else. So that's why I love the transfer portal. I also love transfer portal from the deep perspective of, you know what? Go find a place to play. Look at a guy like Jake Shipley. Shipley couldn't get out here, couldn't get many minutes. Okay, go to North Texas. He's going to love it. He's going to play down there. Let's do it. So again, I have no problem with the transfer portal. I know in the recruiting realm, it's made it much more difficult for the high school students to be able to get these opportunities because they're getting a lot of their spots taken by transfer portal guys. But that means they're going to have to go through a different channel to be a transfer portal guy in the future, possibly. That's just going to be kind of how it goes. The top end guys are still going to go, but the other guys that might not get the same opportunity might have to go a different path. That's just the modern game, and it's changing fast.
And that's a point that I mentioned on a recent episode. I can't remember which one. Maybe it was the Jamari Caldwell commitment. But to your point, just about, I feel like the portal is kind of, leveling out college football to a degree, right? Like you have some of these highly touted guys that come to their school as 4-star, All-American, whatever it is, and if they don't ultimately find the field, you'll see them hit the portal and maybe they end up at another big school. But more often than not, we're seeing they're kind of maybe taking a step down in terms of the level of competition, right? Maybe you're going Pac-12 to Mountain West or something like that, but you want to find a place where you can see the field, like you just mentioned with Jake Shipley, or you're seeing some of these guys who were studs right away, like Evan Stewart, and then he hits the portal and you still have just about every option at your fingertips. So I think that it's spreading out a lot of the talent, and it's, kind of making some of these guys just face the reality like, hey, this is kind of where I'm at. Maybe things haven't exactly gone the way I hoped they would, but let me go to this school where I can see the field and try to make some noise.
I talked with Jay Butterfield at the championship game and Kale Millen, both. Love both those guys. And Jay said on an interview with I think the Mental Sweat show with those guys over there that he said, I couldn't say no to Oregon. When Oregon offered me, it was like a thing where it's like, well, you got to say yes to Oregon. So there's guys who maybe probably shouldn't have been at Oregon in the first place. No offense to Jay, great athlete, great quarterback, whatever else, but maybe he was never at that level. But you know what? The Ducks saw something in him, gave him that opportunity. So he goes there and he finds out, after all these years, I think I'm going to go play someplace else. Now he goes down and plays at a different level. And same thing with a couple of those other guys. Like I said, Kale Millen, one of those other guys. There's something to be said about Oregon being so desirable and the fact that kids want to be there. Remember, when the term that changed the game for me was hearing kids from the South say that Oregon was the dream school and hearing that we were never really even recruiting these guys under the previous Bellotti, Kelly, Helfrich era as much as we were during the Willie Taggart, Mario Cristobal, right? Where these guys were like, dude, I would have loved to go to Oregon. I love Oregon, right? And that didn't make as much sense to us because we didn't really quite see that perspective. Well, now we do. Now we understand it's a national brand. Now we're invested in that sort of situation, and you can see guys who want to kind of be here. It's pretty cool. There's not a lot of places where it's that desirable to go as a transfer portal guy. If you're one of the best transfer portal guys, how many places are there for you to go? So that's also a unique perspective to think about, is to think about there's got to be relationships built. There has to be a position open. There has to be a good team. Well, that means you only got 10, 15 teams to choose from. That's what they said, at the Husky interview. I heard the Husky press conference where he says there's only 15 teams that can be in the national championship every year, and University of Washington's one of them. I was like, I don't know about next year, buddy. But I'm telling you, Jed Fish has a point there. It's like the idea that if you're in that group of the top 20 teams historically, then you're in the chance for that 12 team playoff. And that's the same thing goes with the transfer portal. You have to be a good team with an opening, with relationships maybe to that coaching staff. That number gets pretty small. So the big time transfer portal guys, yes, you would assume everybody wants them, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to take them.
Sure. And that's an awesome point. Talking with my guy, Rian Winter, talking some Duck football. Appreciate you guys tuning in wherever you're tuned in to the podcast. Glad to have you guys along. Couple more points here, Ryan. Let's talk about what could be next for Oregon, because they have 10 commitments right now in the transfer portal. Pretty clearly well over the scholarship limit. I think I've been seeing numbers floating around like 91, 92, but they have plenty of time to get back to that 85. You know, they got to get through spring ball is probably when you're going to see them ultimately really start to trim down the roster. The end, you know, kind of the back end of spring football, right? You know, when they can kind of sit down with those guys and say, hey, spring football is over. This is kind of how we see you fitting into the bigger picture or not fitting into the bigger picture. And some points, right? You kind of got to level with them and let them know where they're at. But as for what's next, you know, something could happen in the hours between when we record this and when it gets posted, right? The transfer portal never stops. It feels like recruiting never stops. So why would the portal? But there really is one big name that we're still keeping an eye on, and that is Washington cornerback Jabbar Muhammad. He's focusing on a final three of Oregon, Texas, and Alabama. He did take a visit to Texas on Wednesday. I was able to confirm that with one of my sources. And Texas looks on the surface like the team to beat because he has a cousin on the team, Malik Muhammad. He has another cousin who is on the women's basketball team, I was told. He's from Texas. You have the location. So just everything kind of seems to be trending in that direction, given the family ties. The Texas secondary wasn't that great last year, so probably a bigger need. But my God, Ryan, if Oregon can add Jabbar Muhammad, what a haul that would be in the transfer portal, and what a scary secondary would that be for Oregon, not just in the Big Ten, but that might be one of the best secondaries in the entire country.
Yeah. And again, you're the expert on that, so I lean on your expertise there. You said it. It feels like Texas. It feels like, you know, if we had the Torres crystal ball, it's not
the fortune cookie.
The fortune cookie. If we open up the fortune cookie says, you know, yeah, it seems like Texas is the thing. And again, I'm not as well tuned into that as you guys are, but yeah, Oregon is the place to be right now. And if you look at the West Coast, it's a very popular team right now. It's building, and that's the kind of almost the boomerang effect of losing those two games to Washington and putting them in second place and putting them right behind the driver's seat. Now, as soon as Washington's out, which they are, I mean, they don't replace anybody right now, or they're going to have to replace everybody right now, I should say, except for some of their guys. I mean, it's nuts what I've heard, some of the stuff out of Washington, how many guys they're going to have to replace. Oregon looks to be the team to beat. And not only that, but now you're going to a Big Ten where it's going to be an exciting year. The national media is going to really want to cover the Ducks. They're going to want to cover that story of the new teams adding to the Big Ten. It totally changes the face of the Big Ten, having those other four teams in there. It gives it brand new life. It gives it brand new kind of perspective nationally. And I think the Ducks are in a prime position to take advantage. I think anybody who's associated with the Ducks, I think all these podcasts, everything else are going to blow up in the Big Ten because they love football up there. And there's a lot of them. And there's a lot more graduates of those schools than there are of our schools out here. We have smaller institutions compared to what they have. They got big time schools over there with a lot of tradition, and they are very proud of it. So I just can't wait to be a part of it. I can't wait to be a part of a conference that cares about it. I mean, I was even saying on my show about this idea that the spring game this next year is probably going to be covered more by the Big Ten than the Pac-12 for college football spring game coverage, even though the Pac-12 will still have technically in business all the rest of this year. But the Big Ten is going to be a hell of a lot more interested in these spring games, I think, than the Pac-12 is. So I just think the writing's on the wall, man, and it's going to be awesome.
Just to be clear here, Ryan, some final thoughts on Jabbar Muhammad, and then we'll get to our last point of the show. I'm not counting the Ducks out. Don't get it twisted. Not counting the Ducks out by any means, but Texas did get the first visit, which is important. We saw that happen with Evan Stewart. That was the first and only visit he took, and then he hopped in the boat. But as far as Jabbar Muhammad here, the signs are pointing towards Texas. I kind of feel like I've seen some stuff that says Oregon leads the way and maybe they're the team to be. I've seen reporting that says they're the team to be. I mean, I've been talking to some people out in the Lone Star State, and they're hearing that even some of the Texas media thinks that Oregon is the team to beat. So I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if it happened. But right now, I'm not super confident in making a pick. So just wanted to add some context there. But man, if they're able to pull this off, oh my God, it would be insane.
It
But
really would. And to go back to your saying, yeah, because to have the lineup that they have right now already, and then to add the guys on the transfer portal, it's ridiculous.
it'd be insane. It'd be totally insane. But let's look at kind of just where Oregon's class is at right now as far as the transfer portal. If you're on YouTube, I'm sharing my screen and showing you guys the current haul via 247 Sports. They don't have Brandon Johnson in here just yet, but I just love how the staff has identified a need and boom, filled it. Like it just feels like every single one of these guys. There are some luxury guys like a Dante Moore or a Jay Harris. I don't think either of those guys were big needs. He would have been totally fine, I think, if you go with Noah Whittington and Jordan James next year. But the Big Ten is super physical defenses. You got Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. The running back position gets banged up. All you have to do is look at the 2023 season for Oregon, right? So bringing in a guy like Jay Harris is huge. You reload the wide receiver room by getting Tez Johnson back. Like that, there's recruiting wins just within the roster, like we talked about earlier. But you get Evan Stewart in, who is super twitchy and explosive. Some good production at Texas A&M. Jamari Caldwell, you needed some help on the interior of the D line. I think you maybe still want some help at that spot. But you get a great kicker in Atticus Sappington. Dylan Gabriel gets things rolling as one of the best quarterbacks available in the portal. And I just don't know if you could draw it up better than it is right now. That's not to say this is perfect or this is the best haul in the country, but the quality over quantity approach is certainly being applied here. And I think it's going to pay off in a big way.
Oh, absolutely. And again, the most important thing right now is the momentum. And I think momentum has a lot to do with how you win football games inside of the 4 quarters of a game. And I think inside of the 4 quarters of a calendar year, you got to get momentum too. That's why I've always liked the bowl game at the end of the year. You get a chance to win it. You get a kick into your, off season with momentum. Boom, you have your off season. You can gain a lot of momentum, gain a lot of traction in your off season. The recruiting boost. And now we've got the transfers that come in. The idea that you want to be there. Again, think of the momentum difference of Oregon in the last week comparatively to Washington. Major difference. That's going to carry a lot of weight. That's going to carry a lot of weight in April and May and June because Oregon already has such a huge head start on that momentum. And again, it's hard to compare to a team that just loses their coach versus a team that gets to keep their coach because we know that being through that perspective, having it a couple times, all too well. But it is something that's really, it's great to be able to see the Ducks not only have positions of need, but be able to capitalize with people who want to be here. And that's the most important thing to me as a Duck fan. Historically, I've always wanted the kids who want to be here. That's why I said the Dream School thing meant so much to us. When we heard guys like Jordan Scott say Dream School, it was like, oh my God, that's so amazing that other people want to be here besides us. And I know it's hard for us to think about that, but beyond, the Northwest, Northern California, a little bit of Southern California, we did not have that big of a footprint. The University of Oregon is a fairly small school. It technically does not really cover that much geographic ground historically. It's obviously has added its infrastructure internationally. It's gained a lot of international students. It's gained a lot of other people coming around interest-wise, but the students that come from the East Coast, very few and far between. There's not that many that come from the Midwest, not that many that come from the South or from Texas or anything else. So when you get guys like Michael James, for example, would come out of Texarkana, I was like, oh my God, this is a huge. Now we got running backs from Texas. I'm like, oh baby, here we go. Because again, that's the situation. It's a unique thing right now. And now it's a proven national brand going to a proven national conference. That's there's nothing in their way. And I think that's the other thing going back to, I'm not here to be like, oh, it's national championship next year. It's not necessarily, but this is a situation when you have a team last year that loses 2 games as close as they do, and they take care of business on every single other level. And then it feels like you're rebuilding and on paper feels like you could be better next year. That's the momentum. That's the thing we're talking about. If you can carry that momentum through a spring game and look really good in the spring and then get it into the fall, and then you in the fall are thinking this in that's the whole concept of any sport. You got to get everybody to believe, man. You got to get everybody to believe. And if those guys all believe in their heart that they're the team to beat, they're going to walk into these games and they're going to already win. They're going to walk in. They're already going to win in the pregame. And that's the idea is you need to walk into this next season thinking you are the team to beat. You're going into a brand new conference. It's almost like switching schools. If anybody switched schools when they were back in the day, you got a brand new opportunity. Go to a new school, re-identify yourself. But the last thing you want to do is walk into that school feeling weak. And think about Washington right now. They're walking to that school. They're walking to that brand new school feeling wounded, man. They're scattered. They don't know where their bags are. They don't know where their classes are. They don't know where their locker is. They're trying to figure everything out. Not us, man. So like right now, it just feels like what was last year, a little bit of a disappointment. Sure, because you were that close. I get it. But it's set up to be an absolute great full calendar year from this point forward. Off-season natty, I'll take it, man.
I love that you said off-season natty because I've seen that on social media, and it certainly feels that way, right? When you're able to identify and acquire the caliber of talent that Oregon has, whether it's from the high school ranks, junior college ranks, transfer portal ranks, they're checking all those boxes. Dan Lanning is in it for the long haul. Just mic drop video of the century, whatever it is.
Exactly.
Oregon's social media team is absolutely killing it right now. I mean, I don't know what else they could do. I mean, I'm kind of just freaking out right now a little bit because the Ducks are killing it. I'm trying to get that energy from here to there. I don't know if that's coming out, but it is a fun time to be covering.
I can feel it.
It is a fun time to be covering this team. And just the last point here, I don't want to go too long, Ryan, was the point that you made about the momentum that they have. Look at all the work they've done in the transfer portal. I mean, we can even dial it back more. The 2024 recruiting class, you got all of those guys signed, and like 75% maybe of them are already enrolled. This is like probably one of the biggest just portions of the class that's already enrolled early in time for spring ball and the winter conditioning program. And then you're probably in a good spot to add Gatlin Bear in early February because Jim Harbaugh is taking any NFL interview he can find, it feels like. So maybe a little bit of uncertainty around Michigan, even though they just won the national championship. That's helping them, I think, helping Oregon if Harbaugh goes to the NFL, right? Because Bear is down to Oregon and Michigan. But also, with all the work they've done in the portal, they're setting themselves up for success with this 2025 class. Oregon's supposed to host their junior day, not this weekend, I believe, but next weekend. And they're already getting some big visitors that are lined up to come from all corners of the country. And they already have a pretty good start in the 2025 recruiting class. So it's rocking and rolling, and it's only going to get crazier, and I think in a good way for Dan Lanning and the Ducks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you nailed it. And people want to be here, and it's taken a long time to build it. But I think there's a lot of momentum to it, but seriously, it would not be this same side of momentum if you didn't have that Big Ten. I mean, we literally, this is the time to celebrate making it off of the boat that was sinking in the Pac-12, because again, even look at what you saw with Jedd Fisch. Jedd Fisch had a great team at Arizona. It looked like everybody was coming back, team to beat possibly in the Big 12 next year, gets an opportunity to go to Washington, said numerous times in his interview or presser that the Big Ten and the SEC were the two conferences to be in. I mean, he said that over and over. So the fact that Oregon's in the Big Ten, the fact that they've got the coach that stays, the fact that they have the balls to actually say in the interview or in the video, if you have if you're scared of a coach leaving, come play for us, dude. You want to talk about? I mean, dude. We thought Chip was heavy, man. I'm telling you, this is a next level thing. And also just a very down-to-earth person, I mean, Dan Lanning is a guy who, if you've met him and been around him, I know you have, is very down-to-earth. He is a genuine person. And I'm a school teacher. I know people who care deeply about kids, and they want to be a part of the positive part of society, and they get into teaching because they're drawn to it, their personality's drawn to it, and they're a perfect fit. Dan Lanning is one of us. Dan Lanning is one of those guys. Dan Lanning was one of those PE teachers the kids wanted to be in his class. They were excited to go to PE, and everybody's had those PE teachers, right? And that's the vibe I get from Dan. And again, when you go into living rooms and you're trying to sell it to a family, they need to believe in the trust. They need to believe in what you're doing. And that whole time, during that whole Nick Saban going retiring and all the news and everything filtering out, and I did a 3-hour live stream where I was freaking losing my mind. all that time, I was thinking to myself, he's staying because he said it over and over how much he loves it here. And I'm believing him until he's gone. And he was genuine about it. And I think that says a lot. That helps with the momentum, obviously. That helps with recruiting. That helps with the transfer portal, everything else. And it helps with the whole me against you mentality, or everybody F everybody but us mentality, or whatever their thing is. And that whole thing is eaten up by the recruits. It's eaten up by the transfers. And those guys want to be here. And when they want to be here, now we can start winning. Now you can start the culture of really, really testing. When you're in the fourth quarter and you need a score, that's when you lean on that culture. And all that's built now. That's built with off-season barbecues and going to the river and doing all that other sort of stuff. So I applaud this coaching staff. I applaud the group. And Dan's just one of those guys. He's a real guy, and he'll be very real with you. A lot of these coaches aren't. I met Jed Fish at the basketball tournament last year in Vegas, and great guy, gave me the whole thing, smiled, did the whole thing, asked me who I was rooting for. I mean, checked all the boxes, but felt like he was also ready to sell me a Lincoln Continental. I mean, the guy was shiny. And that's great because my dad's a car salesman. No offense to car salesmen. They're great people. But my point being is that Dan Lanning is not that guy. He's not trying to sell you the bill of goods. He's letting you understand what it is. And if you want to be a part of it, let's go with it, because now you're on board. And you want a coach that's like that. You want a coach that's giving you an opportunity and being transparent about it too. I think that's the other thing. That video said more to me about being transparent in the conversation than anything. People were saying, Dan Lanning needs to come out and do an interview. He needs to come out and do something. He needs to come out with a statement. He needs to come out that whole night, that whole day. Everybody's thinking, oh, where's this? And then, of course, here it comes. Here comes the creative team. Whammo! With the whole thing, with all the quotes of him throughout the whole year saying basically the same thing every time anybody asked him, the same thing over and over and over. And then I loved the shots of the Utah game because I was at that Utah game. The vibes were so good there. The Ducks went in there and played a freaking great game. They had game day there for Utah. The Ducks went in absolutely crushed. The defense looked amazing. One of the best games of the whole year for the defense last year and this year against Utah. And Dan was so pumped up after that game. He came to the sideline and gave everybody high fives and everything. And I just love that they used a lot of that footage for that, because that was a moment in time where, when I was thinking about it that night of Dan leaving, I was like, he's not going to leave, man. I was there at ASU shaking his hand, how pumped he was after that game. But that Utah game, dude, he was fired up. And that's the game, after the game, I took the picture with him because he was in such a great mood. I was like, I got to get pictures with the coaches after this game. I thought if there's one time I could get a picture with Tosh Lupoy that he'd smile, it would be after that Utah game. And I almost did it. It was like, he was kind of like, it was like the Mona Lisa. So, man, I love this team. I love the energy they have, and I love the fact that they're being transparent about their love for the fan base and for the state as well. That's what really got me, was the fact that they wanted to be here and they love being here. That one like got me, man. So I'm stoked.
Case in point, Ryan, Ducks are hot. Ducks are red hot. They are as hot as any team in college football right now. They may not have gone to the playoff, but boy, are they doing everything they possibly can to make sure they're one of those 12 teams next year and setting themselves up for success in their debut season in the Big Ten. Man, super awesome chat today, Ryan. Appreciate you for coming on, man. If you guys want to find more of Ryan, you got to tap in with him and lock in with him on his YouTube channel. Throwing it up there on the screen. I believe he is also at Sports Chat 503 on Twitter. But if you guys,
whatever, yeah.
There you go. There you have it.
Yeah, no, the main thing is really quickly. The main thing is if you want to go live, Tuesday night live stream, 5:30 to 7:30 Pacific Coast time, Tuesday night. It's a blast. Talk about the Ducks and a variety of other things. Max knows, he's a veteran. And again, much love to you, Max. Again, if I can shout out to the Max Torres community, much love to Max, man. I got nothing but love for y'all.
I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you, Ryan. Well, if you guys want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at mtorresports. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Oregon Football Max Torres. I'm trying to ramp it up again to 5 days a week. I was doing 5 days a week, and then I was like, I'll just do as much as I possibly can. But there's too much going on for me to not go 5 days a week, and this stuff fires me up too much to not do it. So going to try to get back to 5 days a week. and bring you guys more awesome content covering this Oregon football team. And then you can also read me all my stuff covering Oregon football and Oregon football recruiting over on ducksdigest.com. Share the show, like and subscribe. But huge thank you to Ryan for coming on. Thank you to you guys for taking some time out of your day to talk some Duck football with us. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.